Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. The Four Corners program has played some propaganda tonight, and it's called Escape from Saudi, the women who make it and those who actually don't. I'm glad that, we've got an opportunity to respond to this, and that's our duty, because the media every single day is trying to discredit and, create hysteria and create Islamophobia and create hatred for Muslims. And that's why it's our duty to respond and show them the double standards and the inconsistencies, and hopefully clarify that Islam is not an evil religion or an evil cult, and that their rules and regulations are according to justice. So let's listen to the documentary, and what I'll do is I'll just pause it and then give my rebuttal and responses where they're actually trying to tarnish the reputation of Islam.
I'm 18 years old. I can't do anything because they have my passport, and tomorrow they will force me to go back to Kuwait, and I'm here. Please help me, they will kill me. Yes? Who are you?
An official from Kuwait Airways has just knocked at the door and tried to get Rahaf to leave. She's refused. She's made a barricade with a table.
Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat this video, and I'm just going to show you the double standards and the hypocrisy. You see, the West want to make Islam look like the religion of cultism, where if you enter Islam, then basically you're forced to stay within Islam, and if you leave Islam, you get killed and so forth.
18 years old.
Escape from Saudi.
Barricaded in a hotel room in Thailand.
Now, I've got mixed emotions about this. I mean, notice how they've got her barricaded behind the closed door. And, she's already got the media there with her. And this looks like Western journalists. So to me, it looks already fishy from the get-go. I mean, if you're really trying to run away and you're trying to escape this sort of oppression, why are there Western journalists already in the room with you and interviewing you? That to me is quite odd how they're, it looks pretty staged. It looks like they were there from the very get-go. And this is what Western journalists do to propagate their hatred towards Islam or Saudi Arabia. They basically, I might be a little bit cynical about this, but it does happen. I mean, propaganda is real. I mean, this girl probably could have easily left Saudi Arabia if she didn't want to comply with Sharia law, if she wanted to become an apostate or a non-Muslim. She could have easily left Saudi Arabia and gone to another country. But of course, other countries, such as the Western world, they do have a strict immigration policy. And for that reason, it may well be that she just basically got some Western journalists. She probably contacted Western journalists and said, look, maybe we could do something about this. Maybe I could be famous. Maybe I could get some money out of this. At the same time, the Western journalism could make a lot of money out of this story. How about this? How about I go to the media, I approach the media, and in doing so, we could make a lot of money. It could get televised throughout the whole world. The whole Western journalists know about it. I mean, this girl's probably got book deals, Four Corners programs offered to interview her. I mean, can you imagine how much money she's actually making from all of this? And I mean, don't get me wrong, folks, because even Islamophobes themselves, I've actually seen Islamophobes, the Australian Islamophobes, get really happy that this girl is not coming to Australia. And they're like, oh, great, it's great that Canada took her. Because even the Islamophobes, they themselves aren't really even believing in the story themselves. Because if you actually look at some of their rhetoric, they actually say that Muslims can make taqiyya for Islam. They can actually lie in order to get what they want. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with this girl, but the Islamophobes are already skeptical about this case. I mean, I'm not saying it, it's them who are saying this. And we well know that if you say to the American immigration or the Canadian immigration or the Australian immigration that you're fleeing oppression, and especially if you say you're an ex-Muslim or an apostate, you're automatically given a green card to say, here you go. And especially if this girl is being open and transparent about her feelings and even about her identity. I mean, this is what's really bizarre. I mean, this ex-Muslim claims to fear Islam, fear her parents, fear the Saudi regime wanting to execute her, but she doesn't do a single thing to conceal her identity. This is what's bizarre. Even when she went to America and so forth, she basically was on every camera. She never concealed her identity. She never even concealed her first name, even her last name, her family name, nothing at all. She even, she promoted herself to the Western media. So, I mean, if radical Muslims exist in Saudi Arabia, well, we're told they also exist in the West, especially in America, where there have been terrorist attacks. So I'm kind of shaking my head here to say that if this girl really, really feared for her life, why is she not one time worried about her identity? She walks up on press conferences and so forth. So to me, it looks like, I'm not saying it is set up, but it raises some really strong questions to say, hey, maybe it is a possibility. I mean, her face and her identification is literally on every media platform. And I've heard Islamic critics and Islamophobes actually say, hey, look, it's a bit weird that she claims to fear her parents and the government wanting to hunt and kill her. And they're kind of, scratching their heads going, well, why is she publicizing herself so vigorously? Maybe she needs to tone it down. And even Islamophobes or Islamic critics or the Westerners, they're actually questioning the true motives behind this. It seems to me that this was another attempt for her to actually get residency in the West. In saying to the government that you're being oppressed, you're being abused, basically, gets you a green card. And of course, especially if you say you're an apostate, there you go. You start to get book deals, you'll start to get TV shows, documentary deals, and maybe that's her way of making money. I mean, who knows? Maybe she is a legitimate ex-Muslim. Maybe she wanted to cash into it because the Islamophobic industry is a multi-million-dollar industry. So this is...
She's made a barricade with a table and some mattresses.
So there you go. You can see there's Western journalists actually in the room with her. So it really does look set up. I mean, a Western journalist would do anything to jump on this opportunity to make lots of money from it. And it's what a great story to sell. You're being oppressed, you're fleeing from that country and they're trying to kill you and so forth. It sounds like the WikiLeaks guy. WikiLeaks, for example, he spoke about some governmental conspiracies. Edward Snowden. So he basically, fled to other parts of Europe and so forth and tried to seek asylum there. I think it was Russia, I can't remember which country. And notice how, the American government was getting embarrassed by this. And a lot of journalists, different types of journalists, were trying to interview him and so forth. So it seems to be the same, a very similar scenario here. And it attracts people, it attracts customers, it attracts worldwide attention. And that's what it is directed to do. And they know, Western journalists know that it is a profitable business to do that.
Try to flee abroad to other places. The Saudi state is active in exerting its diplomatic influence to try to interdict them.
I mean, the American secular system does the very same thing with people who are trying to tarnish the government of America. And we know that with Snowden and WikiLeaks and so forth, where the American government put lots of pressure to actually get him extradited, to get him imprisoned in the American prison because he was trying to expose the American government and so forth. So Islam is a particular system that also is part of a political system. And so if you're going to go out and speak ill about Islam and try and tarnish Islam, then of course the Saudi government is going to try and put some pressure on particular individuals if they're becoming traitors or if they're trying to commit forms of treason. And so, and these forms of treason are supposed to be taken extremely seriously because, you know, when you're going out and making slanders against Islam or the Prophet of Islam and you're speaking ill against Muslims and Islam and against your own countrymen, you're basically committing treason in the form of hatred. Many people are actually watching this documentary and they're actually probably going to target other Muslims. They're probably going to try and advocate to fight against the Islamic religion and fight against Muslims. And you know, this is how Islamophobia is created when you're turning around and saying, oh, look at this one woman, because she committed treason, that means the Islamic religion is evil and so forth. And that's why you have right-wing groups emerging trying to, you know, ban mosques, trying to, you know, rip hijabs off women and trying to say that all women are oppressed because the Islamic religion imposes a moral dress code and that's why we need to liberate these women. And you have these Islamophobes going out into the street and ripping the hijabs off women because they actually want to, you know, because they believe the Saudi regime or the Islamic regime is forcing them to wear those sorts of things as if women, as if there aren't Muslim women out there who want to adhere to the Islamic religion.
They beat her.
And I don't want you to, I don't want anyone to take this lightly to say, oh, look, you know, she's just oppressed because she denounced Islam and she wants to leave. I mean, that's not exactly what she's doing, right? She's being very provocative. I mean, she could have turned around and said, okay, fine, I leave Islam and that's it. You know, I'm going to go to the West and no other issues. But the fact that she's actually engaging with Western media to say that, look, all of these Muslim women in Saudi Arabia are in prison, they're all being abused, they're all being oppressed. I mean, she's actually trying to instigate war against that Muslim nation. I mean, what does she want? What is she trying to achieve? Is she trying to achieve that America now goes and nukes Saudi Arabia to rescue all these women? And this is why it's very, very dangerous, and this is why Islam tries to put a suppression to vocal ex-Muslims or apostates who try and tarnish and make Islam look bad. Now, I know what you're saying. You're probably saying, oh, look, you know, this Muslim is fearing that Islam is looking bad. No, there are Christian critics and Jewish critics and atheists who actually write every single day against Muslims and Islam and against the Quran. They start trying to pick out contradictions and they write articles. Do we say, oh, you got to kill all of these people? No, that's not what Islam teaches regarding those types of people. If Islam feared criticism, then it would tell you to execute the Christians, the atheists, the Buddhist, all of these skeptics. But that's not what Islam teaches. Islam, in fact, even says that if Christian nations keep the treaty and if they live under even Sharia law, they can live in peace with Muslims, Jews and Christians so long as they pay the jizya and they pay their government taxes and so forth. And of course, there are people who criticize. Even the Quran actually calls to debate with them with wisdom. If the Quran believed in debate, acting with them in wisdom, and I'll post a noble verse below this video in the description section so you can see for yourself, then how can you say that Islam believes to kill the critics? See, the only reason why Islam puts some pressure on the ex-Muslims is because people look up to them as though they are an authoritative person for Islam. So a lot of people would say, oh, look, this ex-Muslim must be true. He must be talking the truth because he was an ex-Muslim. And yes, majority of the women are oppressed in Saudi Arabia and they all want to run from Saudi Arabia. And of course, everyone's going to want to believe this because she's going to claim that she experienced Islam. I mean, how would it be? Would it be fair if I said, look, and actually I was in the past, I used to be a secularist. I used to be a liberalist. Would it be all right if I say to everyone, hey, look, what I say about liberalism and democracy and all of the bad things I say about it, oh, it must be true because you know what? I used to be an ex-secularist. I mean, how would you feel about that? So according to that logic, then everything that I say must be true too. So this is why we say that just because you're an ex-Muslim, it doesn't mean what you're saying is true. But unfortunately, people are very sheepish, and so they believe it. And this is why Islam tries to put a pressure on those types of ex-Muslims who are absolutely vocal about their apostasy because they lead people to damnation. And Islam wants to protect people's well-being. Allah doesn't want you to go to hellfire and to be misled by these foolish ex-Muslims. And that's why it actually puts pressure on them to say, hey, look, if you're going to be vocal about your apostasy, then under Sharia law, and no Muslim can take it into his own hands, under Sharia law, that person gets trialed and judged. But Islam gives you a second option to say, hey, look, if you want to leave, okay, no problem, you could leave, just don't be vocal about it and so forth, and try and, tarnish the reputation wrongfully to misguide other people, or else the Sharia law will deal with you, just as secular law will deal with those who commit treason against the state. And one way to do that, again, is to silently leave Islam. There's nothing wrong with that. But of course, if she did that, she's not going to obviously reap the rewards, because on the other end there are Western white journalists who are waiting at the doorstep, trying to clinch at the opportunity to tarnish the reputation of Islam. It's interesting because when you actually watch the documentary, they put all this fear and they play all this toned down music, with sharp, violent in the sound epics of the entertainment of this documentary, and so they say, oh, look, all of these Saudi women, they basically want to leave the country because they're being oppressed and so forth. But I mean, come on, seriously, we have Islamic female universities in Saudi Arabia, something that the British only introduced way after Islam, because the first university in Cordoba was actually opened by a Muslim woman. And in medieval Europe, they used to burn women at the stake, and a female was not even permitted to go to university until a lot later. If Saudi Arabian women were really, really oppressed and they really were under this totalitarian system, then we should have hundreds of thousands of these women protesting in the streets, demanding they at least want the removal of that type of dictatorship. I mean, forget about them claiming they're apostates or ex-Muslims, they want to leave Islam, they want to rip off their hijabs. You don't even see the simplest, most fundamental protest against the regime. Now, just in case you say, oh, look, they just fear for their lives and that's why they're not really approaching that system. Well, why aren't they doing it even in private manners? I mean, I've looked at all of these cases. I'm telling you, you can't probably count 10 people out of hundreds and thousands and millions of people that reside in Saudi Arabia. And so what they do is they make the allegation seem bigger than it is. They say, oh, look, we found 10 women in the whole Saudi Arabian kingdom who are against the regime, and they feel they're oppressed and compelled, and then they try and make it look bigger than it is. This is all about, media manipulation and trying to project something bigger than it is. And so when the Westerner is watching this and sitting back, he's thinking to himself, wow, look, 10 women have already come out. I mean, can you imagine, folks, the Australian culture that we live in? It is part of the Australian culture that when a person takes booze or alcohol or drink, he comes home and beats his wife. They have White Ribbon Day, for God's sake. White Ribbon Day, where hundreds and thousands of women on a day, on a monthly or a yearly basis, they go out and protest in the street because the Australian culture, the men within the Australian culture, are found to be abusive towards either their girlfriends or their wives. I mean, do we now go out and say, oh, look, hey, come, all you women, come to the Muslim nations, or come to this country, come to the, Bahamas, because, it's all peace and love here, and you're being oppressed here. I mean, come on. I mean, you'd say, no, that's nonsense. You'd say, don't judge a country because of the actions of, some individuals who are pretty nasty within society. And look, I'm not saying that people are perfect within the Saudi Arabian kingdom. I'm pretty sure there are people who abuse human beings. They may take them as slaves. They may be workers in their house, but then they treat them like slaves. He may have a wife where he beats her. You may have certain atrocities that take place, but this doesn't mean that every single human being or vast majority are now suffering under this Sharia law. Now, I know an Islamophobia is saying, oh, well, it is part of Sharia law. It is part of the Islamic system that if you leave Islam, then apostates are to be killed, and then they have objections towards this. But look, that is a very, very small case. And like I said, there are many steps to actually avoid getting to that execution stage where Sharia law may apply that. And again, we have those sorts of laws in the secular world. Yes, you may not get killed, but you can get imprisoned for life. I mean, here is a non-Muslim who actually agrees with me. Look what he says. I'm going to read verbatim for what he says, and you will see that he even believes that there are certain strict laws and regulations in the West. Let's listen to what he says. Benny Bogan is his name. He says, quote, have a look what he says. He says, we don't and never will. He basically says we don't want people to break the laws in Australia. He says the educated sovereign people numbers are growing. He quotes, remember this, anything against our constitution is committed high treason, punishable by death, by hanging or 25 years imprisonment. Read and understand our Constitution, the Constitution of Commonwealth of Australia, 1901, before responding again. So this person believes that there is even a constitution where it says it's punishable by death or imprisonment, and is quoting some Commonwealth law of 1901 regarding people who actually commit treason. Now, if you are a secularist and you are working for the Australian parliamentary government, and then you happen to work, let's say you secretly go and work for the communist and the Chinese, the Australian government is going to now capture you and probably imprison you. And as this guy suggests, hanging, but I'm not too sure whether hanging is permissible. I'm putting my hand up. I'm not too sure about that. This person's actually suggesting it, apparently some Commonwealth law. But to the least, they're actually imprisoning you. Can you imagine if we said, look, if you try to leave Islam, if you try to leave Sharia law, if you try to leave Saudi Arabia and you go and work for the West and you go work for their media networks and you try and tarnish Islam, you know what, folks, we're gonna put this ex-Muslim, we're going to put them in prison. Can you imagine there will be a huge condemnation by the West to say, look at Islam, look how oppressive it is. But then the secularists, they actually do something quite similar. They actually take a person simply because he went and works for the communist or the Chinese. They simply take this person and say, look, you've betrayed Australian law, you've betrayed Australian constitution, we're going to now put you in prison. It's the same goddamn thing. It's no different. Brother Asadullah Ali, he is another Muslim apologist, and he wrote something incredibly amazing. So I'd like to share that in this video. He quotes, "When women like Rahaf Muhammad suffer abuse and the threat of death, we should listen, sympathize, and assist in any way we can, and we should do so for every woman, regardless of their status in life or their political coat they bring. This is justice, this is right, this is moral. But when we do so for the sake of promoting a narrative to universalize the other as pure evil, then we lose the privilege of considering ourselves virtuous. The fact that this one case received so much attention over other more severe cases of abuse and torture of refugees, still waiting months and in some cases years, is rather telling. The fact that Rahaf's loss of faith and her appreciation for alcohol and bacon are far more important news items than her education, personality, background, cultural views is an indicative of how the West values her. She was not given international attention and asylum because of the selfless virtue of Westerners, but because she's an opportunity. She is the Nobel savage presented to the world as evidence of the West's superiority, like a zoo exhibit shown off to attract more customers. Meet the baby pandas. Raf is surrounded by mostly white Western women smiling into cameras, sometimes alongside other ex-Muslims, trying to look like those white Western women. Yet there are so many other refugees who have suffered worse and still suffer worse, waiting in the queue. Watching Raf become a hero who doesn't represent them nor cares about them. Now they know that the only way they will ever be valued is if they do what Rafa does. Lose their religion, lose their culture, eat bacon and drink alcohol, and above all else, tell the West what it wants to hear, that they are worth nothing as they are.
Managed to escape to Australia successfully.
I have a friend there, and she said it's...
Okay, so Rafaf is talking about how apparently other women have escaped into Australia from Saudi Arabia, and now apparently those women are reporting back to Rafa to tell her about the Western Enlightenment and how it is. Have a listen.
A good country. They have rights for women, and I can work, I can study there. So that's what I want to go to Australia.
I mean, that's absolutely ludicrous. She says that, she wants to study and that's why she wants to go to Australia. Saudi Arabia has got one of the biggest female universities in the whole, Islamic world. And there are many women who have got PhDs in Saudi Arabia who have got some great academia. For her to say, look, I need to go and study again. See, this is more propaganda, and this is why, this is why these people create mischief, these ex-Muslims, to say, hey, look, we need to leave the barbaric Saudi regime because, they imprison us in our homes and we can't study. But then that same country has got female universities for women. And so the narrative doesn't actually add up. And this is why Islam puts pressure on these particular ex-Muslims who actually try and lie and cause profanity.
They have rights for women, and
I didn't get that bit. Rights for women. I'm not too sure what she was trying to say there. You know, she wants beaches. Tell you the truth, man, I've been seeing some Saudi beaches, and Jesus, I mean, Dubai, for example, some of the things that I see there, Australia doesn't even have, man. I'm thinking we're so backwards. The Dubai looks a lot more advanced than Australia when it comes to tourism and things like this. I'm like, man, you should have just stayed in Dubai. But of course, you know, she probably wouldn't be able to afford it.
My name is Rahaf Muhammad. I'm 18.
I mean, it's not easy to afford it, so obviously your best bet is to, you know, claim you're an ex-Muslim, and, you know, I mean, she probably is one, but, you know, she took advantage of the dollars and all the Western media. She's probably, I mean, she says she wants a job in the West. I mean, you've got a job now. I mean, what better job do you want? You're going to be like an Ayan Ali Hirsi, write books, make millions of dollars, spread propaganda and lies about Islam and misrepresent Islam and say, look, all the women are oppressed. There you go, you've won millions of dollars. Why do you want Dubai? Why do you want those holiday resorts? Man, you could go buy yourself an island in Hawaii somewhere.
Australia. I read a lot about the weather and beach, a lot of things like this.
And what did you learn about women in Australia?
About what?
Women.
About women.
Yeah.
Like the rights. They have everything. Like everything. You can do everything that we can do.
I mean, do you notice the journalist's question? Why did the journalist have to ask such a provocative question like that? You can see it has a propaganda motive. You know, when you say, you know, what do you know about the women of Australia? Already you're taking the superiority complex to say, look, the values of women in Australia are much better than the values of women in Islamic countries. And already, do you see how the narrative already has a biased propaganda agenda? And this is why we say, you know, her strings are being pulled. You know, it seems to be it's set up. Obviously, the media are there to try and make news out of it and to make money out of it and to do propaganda against Islam, because it's a fantastic story for them to do. And this is why she actually asked such a question, to already make it a battle between the West versus Islam. And so then they are using her, and this is why we say Islam is putting pressure against these types of ex-Muslims who want to lie and propagate this false narrative. I mean, look at the narrative. It says, oh, women can do whatever they want. They are free. I mean, should we now explain to this ex-Muslim that according to the Australian culture, women are getting beaten and abused by a lot of the white-collar Australians who go out and drink alcohol and beat up their girlfriends? Because apparently, according to Australian society and according to Australian culture, that is pretty much the thing to do. It's embedded in Australian culture. In fact, there are TV commercials to say that, you know, you're not supposed to treat women in a certain way. The TV commercial was showing how a woman starts crying, and I think one of the male boys, they actually say, well, a woman is supposed to cry because she's a girl, and they're trying to say, oh no, look, we need to reverse that narrative. No, just because you're a girl, it doesn't mean you have it's okay to cry, or it's okay to accept that sort of bully behaviour from a male member. And so they're trying to educate and reshift the Australian culture. And so if the Australian culture was good, there was nothing wrong with it, women are superior and so forth, then why do they have constant TV commercials trying to enlighten humanity and the Australian public to say, do not treat women in this way, because there is a cultural problem against the treatment of women in this country, and it exists in all places. You know, how about we talk about the pay gap? I mean, this girl wants to come to Australia to work, but then there's a huge Australian pay gap between men and women in this country. I'm reading you from the Australian media network, news.com. Workplace Gender Equality Scorecard puts Australia to shame, and you can actually see the gender gap here. It quotes, the overall gender pay gap for full-time workers is 24%, meaning men earn an average total of $27,000 a year more than women. The gap is even higher for female managers, excluding CEOs, who take home 29% less than their male counterparts. So, you know, when this lady, this ex-Muslim, wants to say, oh, women get everything, yeah, come see the gender gap. Just the other day in Melbourne, Australia, an Israeli Arab student was killed. I mean, yeah, so you want to talk about Australia, you know, women are being sexually exploited day in, day night. Yeah, they've got rights, but they've got so many abuses as well. They give them their rights in order to abuse them. You go see how many times they get sexually harassed at workplaces and so forth. How, you know, that's why you have these huge feminist movements in Australia. If Australia was all about equal rights, men and women, why do you have such vigorous feminist movements out there trying to always say that that there is so much work to do here in Australia, and that there's so much discrimination, that they need to get equality in all aspects of life? They are fighting with the system every single day. So, you know, you're turning around and saying you're running from oppression and from the Saudi system and government, yet you have the feminists here in this country who are trying to tear down their government and their systems for the occupation and how they actually treat women in this country. Now, isn't that bizarre?
Rahaf is taken to a hotel downtown under tight Thai police guard. The next day, her father and brother fly into Bangkok to try to force her home. The Saudi embassy meets with Thai officials on their behalf. There is pressure on Australia to take Rahaf.
That's pretty interesting. He's like, I wish they took her phone away from her instead of her passport. I mean, look, if the father actually wanted her to die and he wanted her to return, why is he saying they should have taken her phone away from her instead of her passport? Because, you know, because this is what she's trying to achieve, and this is what the West actually want. The West want to actually embarrass the actual family members and try and tarnish the religion of Islam. And so the father is actually saying, instead of his daughter going out and trying to tarnish and embarrass and tarnish Islam and the Muslims and Saudi Arabia, then you know what? They should have actually... the Saudi regime should have actually banned her phone instead of her actual passport. So the father basically didn't mind her Australian visa not to be cancelled. You know, he was more worried that he wanted her phone to be cancelled and not the Australian visa, so much about him wanting to kill her and so forth like that. I mean, he obviously was upset about what the Western media was saying about him and his family and all that sort of stuff. So this goes to show the propaganda doesn't actually match up about the father wanting to kill her and so forth. He wanted, instead of her Australian visa cancelled and passport, he wanted her phone bloody cancelled.
There is pressure on Australia to take Rahaf.
There is pressure on Australia to take Rahaf. I mean, why? Is that because she's an ex-Muslim and she gets these special privileges? Where was this Australian media, Four Corners, reporting on Manus Island and how, we need to save all of them. They need to come to Australia. We need to put pressure on the Australian government and so forth. Where were they then? It seems that, they've made a 45-minute documentary on this ex-Muslim, but about Manus Island, oh, no. How come the Western journalists and the interviewers didn't go to Manus Island and start interviewing them individually one by one and start reporting to the Australian public? Talking about how barbaric the Australian constitution and system is for enslaving those people in those tiny little concentration camps. Again, where was the world condemnation of Manus Island? Why didn't it hit Canada, America, and so forth? Why wasn't it such a massive, epic documentary? I haven't seen an epic documentary 45 minutes long by Four Corners. Where are those reporters going secretly in Manus Island and reporting what is going on in there? Oh, that's right. That story won't sell as good because, come on. Are they really ex-Muslims? Are they really saying they're running away from, tyrannic regimes like Saudi Arabia? No, I don't think they are. Are they claiming apostasy in the love of bacon and drinking alcohol? No, not really. Oh, of course not. Let's move on here.
For those facing immediate threats to their life. They refer her case to Australia, and Rahaf is taken to the Australian Embassy in Bangkok to process her case. The next day, Foreign Minister Marise Payne arrives in the Thai capital on a short visit.
On a short visit, she's there the next day processing and looking into her account. Can you imagine this? So if you are an ex-Muslim, if you are an apostate, if you're running from, Saudi Arabia and oppression, the very next day, you get a visit from the Australian Minister of Affairs.
The next day, Foreign Minister Marise Payne arrives in the Thai capital on a short visit.
There is no possibility that Ms. Alkanen will be going back with me, as you put it, today.
That's because I've just spoken to the Canadian Minister of Affairs and we've actually handballed the case over there. And so, we don't need to do anything more than we can now, can we? Wow, how quick was that process? Wow. So you know what? If you are a person of interest that wants to come from Saudi Arabia and live the Western lifestyle, man, just say you're an apostate. You'll have the Australian Minister of Affairs coming to visit you the next day at the embassy. She'll either accept you in her country or she'll just handball you to the next second best country, which is Canada. Makes perfect sense.
Which are required in the process, which Australia and any other country considering such a matter would have to go through. We will go through those according to our own system and our own processes.
Is there a time frame for that?
Not a specific time frame, no.
By Friday morning, there is still no decision from Australia, and the UN is increasingly worried about Rahaf's security.
Oh, really worried about her security? She's in the hands of Thai officials. How are they even worried about her security? She's not going back. She's already in the bridging process. Why are they so worried about her? They're processing it by Friday. Can you imagine, guys? Manus Island, there've been children stuck there for, 8 years, 10 years? They've been sitting there, and it's like, I think just recently, they're getting shipped over to America. Where were they? This girl just had to wait, a few days? And they're like, wow, look, she's got to wait now till Friday. Oh, jeez. A couple of days? Wow.
Yeah. And the UN is increasingly worried about Rahaf's security. They take her to the Canadian Embassy, where her visa is approved in a matter of hours.
In a matter of hours, he was approved. Wow, guys. Well, you know what? If you're an immigrant, you want to come to Australia, well, you know what to do now, folks. Just say you're an ex-Muslim, an apostate, you hate the Saudi regime, you love alcohol and bacon, and you know what? Within hours, your visa will get approved and your application will get handed over and approved by the Canadians.
Toronto tonight.
Well, she's going to Toronto tonight. Beautiful. So you know what to do if you're an ex-Muslim next time. Even if you're not an ex-Muslim and you want to get refuge in the West, you know exactly what to do to get your visa application approved ASAP.
Everyone, please. I'll give the flowers to Rafa.
Oh, look, let's give Rafa flowers surrounded by white women. Oh, look at this, guys. She's liberated now. Look, she's even wearing an American cap. She's trying to look as much Americanized as possible. Have a look at me, guys. Look, let's now celebrate the Western values. You know, I'm so afraid of publicity. I'm so afraid of radical Muslims coming after me and wanting me dead. But now I'm going to act like Miss Celebrity in front of all the cameras.
Okay, so everyone, this is Rafa Altman, a very brave new Canadian.
Oh, she's so brave. I mean, she's so brave. Yes, so brave. If you are an asylum seeker fleeing Islam, you will fly in first-class cabin, eat caviar and drink wine. If you are fleeing bombs, wars, dictatorship and invasion, you will walk through mud, sleep in tents and suffer beatings by border guards. But of course, Rafa is actually the brave immigrant.
She still can't believe she made it.
It's actually very believable, the fact that she's an ex-Muslim. I mean, she can't believe it because she's actually seen a lot of the legit Muslims get rejected, and she's probably surprised why the door has been opened to her. Well, we know why, because she's an ex-Muslim, an apostate, and someone who speaks against Saudi Arabia.
حسيت إني حرة وانولدت من جديد وكان شيء رائع وفرحني لأني لقيت كثير من المحبة والاستقبال. أكيد الحرية هي أهم شيء للإنسان. أنا تخليت عن كل شيء عشان أكون حر.
What do you mean by freedom? I mean, you could be a rebellious person and not accept the laws of Islam, and you can declare you're free. I could declare I'm free if I leave secular rule and secular ideology and a secular way of thinking. I could say I'm free as well by moving to a Muslim country and saying, look, I'm free from all the propaganda and the media and the society biases on how we should actually view life in general and things like that. Anyone could be free, but that doesn't mean that you're simply oppressed. If you basically don't want to live under those systems, you can just break free and basically leave the country without trying to blow too much trumpets around. And if you want to become a non-Muslim, go for it. Just don't live in an Islamic state under a Sharia system. Just leave. That's it. It's simple. But, for you to turn around and demonize and say you were oppressed, you don't even look like you've been oppressed. Honestly, you don't look like you've been oppressed. And if you are oppressed, anything can be a form of oppression. If I wanted to walk naked in Australia and if the Australian government said, no, you can't walk naked because that's not what the law permits, and I say, oh, well, I'm being oppressed now. I want to walk naked. And the Australian government's like, no, you have to wear some clothes now because you'll get arrested and you'll get a fine. No, but I want to walk naked, and if you don't let me walk naked, I'm just going to tell the rest of the world that you are a cult and you are a secular totalitarian and you're taking my freedoms away. I mean, do you see how it sounds? Yes, Islam does. Saudi Arabia may say you need to wear a hijab and so forth, but that's their law. That's what their government teaches, and if you don't like it, leave. I mean, your average Australian would tell a Muslim, this is our country, these are our laws. If you don't obey it, then they use the F word and say, F off, get out of this country then, go find yourself somewhere else. So why is it that the Australians and the secularists can say those same sentiments for Muslims who feel oppressed? If a Muslim wants to, for example, practice polygamy in this country, Australia doesn't allow it. I mean, can you imagine if all these Muslim men who wanted polygamy got up and stood up and said, oh, look, the Australian system is oppressive. It doesn't allow me to have my freedom and be free and practice my own choice and my own right. Well, the Australian society would say, well, okay, then just leave. Go to a Muslim country then. Okay, great. Well, we'll tell this ex-Muslim, well, you now go to a secular country. All right, you want freedom? Go. But don't you dare say, oh, you've got total freedoms there. Well, I can't practice polygamy in America. I can't practice polygamy in Australia. Should I go out and say, oh, there's no freedoms? No country has complete freedoms. If you want a country that has complete freedoms, maybe you got to go to Mars. Go to planet Mars. Yes. Go to planet Mars. There's no laws. There's no regulations. Go. But do not sit there on a pedestal and say, oh, we have freedom here while there's oppression there, when the same thing could be pointed at you.
Under Saudi Arabia's male guardianship system, a man controls a woman's life from birth until her death. Every Saudi woman must have a male guardian, normally a father or husband, who has the power to make critical decisions on her behalf.
I mean, this is a load of rubbish. She didn't quote any single evidence for her claim or even a mere example to say a man is in complete control of her adult and her teenage or her from birth. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous to say that a man has complete control over her. This is absolutely nonsense. Yes, there are different gender roles between men and women and so forth. The correct Islamic understanding is, yes, the husband must protect the family, lead the family, provide for the family, and the wife must comfort, teach, nurture, and the children must love parents and obey parents and all that sort of stuff. It all comes under one umbrella, but this doesn't mean that when the wife needs to protect the family, she needs to protect the family. When the husband needs also some leadership and is falling apart, then of course the wife can come in and try and fulfill some leadership if he's confronting some hardship. And if the husband is also finding difficulty to provide for the family, of course the wife could come in and help out to provide for the family. If the wife is falling out to give comfort or be a teacher and nurturer, of course the husband can come in and do those things as well. It's a give and take relationship. And of course, because of the physical biological difference is why he is the leader in trying to protect his family physically and so forth. So biology and science understands this, but of course you can't really try explain this because women suddenly feel feministic and inferior towards men if you suddenly say, oh look, he's trying to lead them, to protect them and so forth. You know, it's funny how they say a man controls a woman's life. Did you know that when a woman actually earns her own money or her own wealth, a husband, for example, he's got no say on what she actually spends it on, and she can actually spend it on himself and on herself, and she doesn't even have to spend it on her husband, while the man is compelled to provide for her, and she is allowed to take that money, and she's allowed to question him on that, and and he is supposed to provide for her while she doesn't even have to do that.